The crack of Margaret's hand against Ezra's cheek echoed through the bustling street fair, sharp enough to halt laughter and chatter in its tracks. A gasp rippled through the crowd, strangers clutching their cotton candy and cider, eyes wide as the autumn leaves stilled in the breeze. Ezra, 17, stood frozen, his face stinging not just from the slap, but from the weight of every stare now pinned on him. He didn't flinch. Not outwardly. Inside, though, his chest burned with a fury he'd spent years burying. A fire stoked by the woman who'd claimed the title of stepmom, but never the role of family. Margaret's lips curled into a tight line, her eyes glinting with that familiar mix of disdain and triumph. "You will not disgrace this family," she hissed, her voice low but venomous, as if the words could erase the scene unfolding before the entire town of Willow Creek. Ezra's hand tightened around the leather journal clutched to his chest, his mother's journal. The one thing she'd left him before cancer stole her away 3 years ago. He could still smell the faint lavender of her perfume on its pages. A ghost of comfort in a world that felt increasingly like a cage. Margaret had always hated that journal. Hated anything that tied Ezra to his late mother, Clara. But today, in front of everyone, she'd crossed a line. Liam, standing just a step behind, moved forward, his green eyes blazing. "That's enough, Margaret," he said, his voice steady but laced with a quiet fury that made the air feel heavier. At 19, Liam was Ezra's anchor, the one person who saw through the cracks in his guarded exterior. They'd met 6 months ago at the community center's art class, where Liam's sketches of starlit skies had somehow softened the edges of Ezra's grief. Their friendship had grown into something unspoken, something fragile and electric, though neither had dared name it. Margaret's gaze snapped to Liam, her expression souring further. "Stay out of this, Liam. This is a family matter." The word family landed like another slap, and Ezra's jaw clenched. Family. Margaret had married his father, Paul, barely a year after Clara's death, moving into their creaky New England home with her rigid rules and colder heart. Paul, once a warm, boisterous man, had withered under her influence, now a shadow who nodded along to her decrees. The fair's music, a Johnny fiddle tune, felt jarringly out of place as Ezra locked eyes with Margaret. "You don't get to decide what I am," he said, his voice low but unwavering. The crowd murmured, some stepping closer, drawn to the drama like moths to a flame. Ezra's heart pounded, not from fear but from the weight of what he'd just done. He'd stood up to her, publicly, for the first time. Liam's hand brushed Ezra's arm, a fleeting touch that grounded him. "Let's go," Liam whispered, his voice a lifeline. But before Ezra could move, Margaret's voice sliced through again. "You think you can parade around with him, flaunting your choices?" She spat the word like it was poison, gesturing at Liam with a sneer. "Your mother would be ashamed." The mention of Clara was a knife to Ezra's heart. He wanted to scream that Margaret didn't know Clara, that she had no right to wield her memory like a weapon. But words failed him, tangled in the grief and rage that surged in his chest. Instead, he turned, journal in hand, and walked away, Liam at his side. The crowd parted, their whispers trailing like leaves in the wind. They ended up at the edge of the fair, near the old oak tree where Ezra used to read with his mom. The festival's noise faded, replaced by the rustle of leaves and the distant hum of cicadas. Ezra sank to the ground, his back against the tree, the journal heavy in his lap. Liam sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched, his sketchbook resting on his knees. "She's wrong," Liam said softly, his eyes fixed on the horizon where the sun dipped low, painting the sky in hues of amber and rose. "Your mom wouldn't be ashamed. Not of you." Ezra's throat tightened. "You didn't know her." His voice was barely a whisper, raw with the ache of loss. "I know you," Liam said, turning to meet his gaze. "And I know you're carrying her with you. Every day. That journal, it's proof of how much she loved you." Ezra's fingers traced the worn leather cover, its edges frayed from years of handling. Clara had filled it with letters to him, written in her final months, each one a piece of her heart preserved in ink. He hadn't read them all, some hurt too much, but the ones he had read spoke of love, courage, and a fierce belief in him. He'd kept them private, a secret sanctuary. Until now. I don't know how to do this, Ezra admitted, his voice cracking. Live in her house, with her rules, pretending I'm someone I'm not. He didn't say the rest. Didn't need to. Liam understood the weight of what Ezra hid, the truth about who he was, who he loved. Liam reached out, his hand resting lightly on Ezra's. You don't have to pretend. Not with me. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Ezra's pulse quickened, a mix of fear and longing. He wanted to lean into Liam, to let the walls he'd built crumble. But the sting of Margaret's slap and the town stares held him back. I found something, Ezra said instead, flipping open the journal. Last night, in one of her letters. It's different. He hesitated, then handed the journal to Liam, pointing to a page marked with a pressed maple leaf. Liam read aloud, his voice soft but clear. Ezra, my heart. There's a truth I've kept, not out of shame, but to protect you. If you're reading this, you're ready to know. Ask your father about the summer of '98. He'll understand. Ezra frowned. The summer of '98. I wasn't even born yet. What could she mean? Liam's brow furrowed, his fingers lingering on the page. Maybe it's something about your dad. Or her. The weight of the unknown settled over them, a mystery that felt both thrilling and terrifying. Ezra glanced back toward the fair, where Margaret's silhouette still loomed in the distance, her presence a shadow over his life. Whatever Clara's secret was, it was a spark, a chance to understand, to fight back, to reclaim the pieces of himself Margaret had tried to erase. We'll figure it out, Liam said, his voice firm with conviction. Together. Ezra nodded, the journal warm in his hands. Clara's words a quiet promise. The truth was out there, waiting. And for the first time in years, Ezra felt ready to chase it. The next morning, Ezra woke to the scent of burnt toast and the muffled sound of Margaret's voice barking orders at his father in the kitchen. The memory of the fair clung to him like damp clothes, heavy and uncomfortable. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling of his attic room, the journal resting on his nightstand like a talisman. Clara's letter gnawed at him. The summer of '98. He tried to picture Itha's parents young, maybe in love, before grief and Margaret reshaped their lives. But his father, Paul, was a locked vault when it came to the past. Ezra had only vague memories of his dad before Clara's death, a man who'd toss him into the air, laughing, or hum old rock songs while fixing the porch swing. Now, Paul was a ghost in his own home, his eyes always averted, his voice soft with apologies. Ezra slipped downstairs, avoiding the creaky step that would announce his presence. In the kitchen, Margaret was slicing apples with surgical precision, her back rigid. Paul sat at the table, nursing a coffee, his shoulders hunched. Ezra hesitated, then cleared his throat. Dad, he said, clutching the journal. Can we talk? About Mom. Paul's head jerked up, his eyes flickering with something fear. Maybe. Or guilt. Margaret's knife paused mid-cut. Not now, Ezra, she said, her tone sharp. We're preparing for the church luncheon. It's important, Ezra pressed, his voice steady despite the knot in his stomach. He held up the journal. She wrote something. About the summer of '98. Paul's face paled, his coffee mug trembling slightly in his hand. What? What did she say? Margaret spun around, her eyes narrowing. That's enough. You will not drag Clara's nonsense into this house. It's not nonsense, Ezra snapped, his voice rising. It's her words. My mom's words. The room went silent, the air thick with tension. Paul's gaze darted between Ezra and Margaret, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Finally, he stood, his chair scraping against the floor. Ezra, let's talk outside. Margaret's lips pressed into a thin line, But she said nothing as Ezra followed his father to the back porch. The air was crisp, the scent of pine mingling with the faint smoke from a neighbor's chimney. Paul leaned against the railing, avoiding Ezra's eyes. "What did she write?" Paul asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Ezra opened the journal, reading the letter aloud. When he finished, Paul's face was unreadable, a mix of sorrow and something deeper, something hidden. "The summer of '98. Paul echoed, rubbing his hands together as if to warm them. "That was a long time ago." "Dad, what happened?" Ezra's voice was urgent now, pleading. "She said you'd understand." Paul's eyes glistened, and for a moment, Ezra thought he might cry. But then his father straightened, his voice firm. "It's not my story to tell, Ezra. Not yet." The refusal hit like a punch. Ezra's grip on the journal tightened, his knuckles white. "Not your story. She was my mom. I deserve to know." Paul's gaze softened, but he shook his head. "You will. I promise. But give me time." Time. Ezra wanted to scream that he'd given enough time. 3 years of silence. Of Margaret's rules. Of pretending he didn't feel what he felt for Liam. But before he could argue, the screen door slammed, and Margaret's voice cut through. "Paul, we're late." "Ezra, enough of this." Ezra turned away, his heart pounding. He needed answers, and if his father wouldn't give them, he'd find them himself. At school, Ezra met Liam in the art room, their usual sanctuary. Liam was sketching, his pencil moving in fluid arcs, creating a portrait of a boy who looked suspiciously like Ezra. "You okay?" Liam asked, not looking up from his work. Ezra slumped into a chair, the journal thudding onto the table. "Dad knows something, but he won't talk. It's like he's scared of her." Liam set his pencil down, his green eyes searching Ezra's face. "Maybe he's scared of the truth." The words hung heavy, and Ezra felt a spark of determination. "I'm going to find out what happened in '98. Whatever it is, it's mine to know." Liam nodded, his hand brushing Ezra's again. "A quiet promise. Then we'll dig. Together." They started at the library after school, combing through old newspapers on microfiche. Willow Creek's archives were a treasure trove of small-town history fairs, floods, and local scandals. Ezra's fingers trembled as he scanned headlines from 1998, hoping for a clue. Most were mundane: a new mayor, a factory closing. But then Liam paused, his finger tapping the screen. "Look at this," he said, pointing to a grainy photo. It was a pride event, small but bold for a town like Willow Creek. A group of people held rainbow flags, their faces blurred but defiant. The caption read, "Local group hosts first pride rally. Faces backlash." Ezra's heart raced. Mom was part of this. Liam frowned, scrolling through the article. It doesn't name names, but it says the organizer was a young woman. Could that be Clara? The possibility sent a shiver through Ezra. Clara, his soft-spoken mother who'd read him bedtime stories and baked apple pies, involved in something as bold as a pride rally. It didn't fit the image he'd held of her, but it made her letters feel alive. Urgent. They printed the article, tucking it into the journal. As they left the library, the sky was darkening, a storm brewing on the horizon. Liam's shoulder bumped Ezra's, a silent reassurance. "We're getting closer," Liam said. Ezra nodded, but his mind was spinning. If Clara had been part of that rally, what else had she hidden? And why had she wanted him to know now? The rain came that night, relentless, drumming against the roof of Ezra's attic room. He sat cross-legged on his bed, the journal open, the Pride article tucked between its pages. Clara's handwriting stared back at him, each loop and curve a piece of her he clung to. But now, her words felt like a puzzle, each letter a piece that didn't quite fit. Liam had texted earlier, suggesting they talk to Mrs. Hargrove, the librarian who'd lived in Willow Creek her whole life. "She remembers everything," Liam had said. "If anyone knows about '98, it's her." Ezra agreed, but the thought of exposing his mother's secrets to someone else made his stomach twist. What if they judged her? What if they judged him? At breakfast, Margaret was colder than usual, her eyes flicking to the journal as Ezra slipped it into his backpack. "You're not still obsessing over that thing, are you?" she said, her voice dripping with disdain. Paul, stirring his oatmeal, said nothing, his silence a familiar betrayal. "I'm not obsessing," Ezra said, his tone flat. "I'm remembering." Margaret's fork clattered against her plate. "Your mother's gone. Ezra, let her rest." The word stung, but Ezra didn't flinch. He grabbed his jacket and left, the rain soaking him as he biked to the library. Liam was waiting under the awning, his sketchbook tucked under his arm, his hair damp and curling at the edges. "You look like a drowned cat," Liam teased, but his eyes were soft, concerned. Ezra managed a half-smile. "Feel like one, too." Inside, Mrs. Hargrove greeted them with a warm smile, her glasses perched on her nose. She was in her 60s, her hair a silver crown, her memory sharper than the microfiche machine. "What brings you boys back so soon?" she asked, her voice kind but curious. Ezra hesitated, then slid the Pride article across the counter. "We're looking into 1998. This rally. Do you remember it?" Mrs. Hargrove's smile faded slightly, her eyes scanning the article. "Oh, yes. That was a bold day for Willow Creek. Caused quite a stir." She paused, her gaze flicking to Ezra. "Why do you ask?" Ezra's throat tightened, but Liam stepped in, his voice steady. "We think Ezra's mom, Clara, might have been involved. We're trying to understand her." Mrs. Hargrove's expression softened, a flicker of recognition in her eyes. "Clara Thompson, your mother was a firebrand." Ezra, quiet, but fierce. "She helped organize that rally. You know, faced a lot of hate for it, too." Ezra's heart stuttered. "Hate? From who?" The librarian sighed, leaning back in her chair. "The usual folkspeople like Margaret's family. The Carters. They were vocal back then, led the charge against the rally. Called it a sin, a disgrace." Clara stood her ground, though. She believed in love, in all its forms. Ezra's mind reeled. Margaret's family. The Carters. It explained her venom, her need to control him, to erase anything that didn't fit her rigid worldview. But Clara, his mom, had fought for something bigger, something that resonated deep in Ezra's chest. "Did she ever talk about why?" Ezra asked, his voice barely audible. Mrs. Hargrove's eyes softened further. "She said it was personal, that she was fighting for someone she loved." The words hit Ezra like a wave, stirring a memory of Clara's letter, "A truth I've kept. Not out of shame, but to protect you." He glanced at Liam, who was watching him with quiet intensity, his sketchbook open to a new page, a rough outline of Clara's face taking shape. "Thank you," Ezra said, his voice thick. He felt exposed, raw, but also alive in a way he hadn't in years. Outside, the rain had slowed to a drizzle. Liam nudged Ezra's shoulder. "Your mom was a hero. You know." Ezra nodded, his eyes on the journal. "I just wish I knew who she was fighting for." They walked to the park, the air heavy with the scent of wet grass. Liam flipped open his sketchbook, showing Ezra the drawing of Clara, a woman with kind eyes and a determined jaw, a rainbow flag faintly sketched behind her. "This is how I see her," Liam said. "Maybe it's how you should, too." Ezra's chest ached, a mix of pride and grief. He wanted to tell Liam everything, how his heart raced when their hands brushed, how he'd spent years hiding who he was because of Margaret's glares and the town's whispers. But the words stuck, tangled in fear. Instead, he said, "Let's keep looking. There's more to this." That night, Ezra snuck into the attic storage, where his mother's things were boxed away, hidden by Margaret's orders. The air was musty, the boxes coated in dust. He found a small wooden chest, locked, but the key was taped to the Batomas secret Clara had left for him. Inside were more letters, photos, and a faded rainbow pin. One photo showed Clara, young and radiant, standing arm in arm with a woman Ezra didn't recognize. They were laughing, their faces bright against a backdrop of protest signs. On the back, in Clara's handwriting, me and Lena. 98. We were fearless. Ezra's breath caught. Lena. Who was she? And why had Clara never mentioned her? Ezra barely slept, the photo of Clara and Lena burning in his mind. He sat at his desk, the wooden chest open, its contents spread out like pieces of a life he'd never known. The rainbow pin glinted under his lamp, a tiny beacon of his mother's courage. Lena. The name felt like a key. But to what lock? At school, he showed Liam the photo. They sat in the art room, the hum of fluorescent lights overhead. Liam's fingers traced the edges of the image, his expression thoughtful. She looks happy, he said. Clara. I mean. And this Lena, there's something about her. Ezra nodded, his throat tight. I need to find her. If she was important to Mom, she might know what the letters mean. Liam's eyes met his, steady and warm. We will. But we need to be careful. If Margaret finds out. Ezra's jaw clenched. She won't. Not yet. They returned to the library, armed with the photo and a name. Mrs. Hargrove was shelving books, her movements slow but deliberate. When Ezra showed her the photo, her face lit up with recognition. Lena Martinez, she said, a wistful smile tugging at her lips. She and Clara were thick as thieves back then. Lena was an artist. Like you, Liam. Left town after the rally. Broke a lot of hearts, including your mother's. I'd wager. Ezra's heart sank. Broke her heart. Were they? He couldn't finish. The question too big. Too raw. Mrs. Hargrove's gaze softened. Close. Very close. But things were different then. People like the Carters made it hard for anyone to live openly. Lena left for Boston. Last I heard. Boston. It was only an hour away, but it felt like another world. Ezra's mind raced. Could Lena still be there? Would she talk to him? Liam jotted down the information, his sketchbook now a makeshift detective's notebook. We can search online, he said. Maybe she's still an artist. People leave traces. That afternoon, they huddled at Liam's house, his laptop open to a search for Lena Martinez Artist Boston. The results were sparse, but one link caught their eye, a small gallery listing for Lena Martinez, showcasing abstract paintings with titles like Freedom in Color and Summer Rebellion. The bio mentioned Willow Creek, confirming it was her. Ezra's pulse quickened. We have to go? I need to know what she meant to Mom. Liam hesitated, his brow furrowing. It's a big step. Ezra. What if it's not what you expect? Ezra met his gaze, his voice firm. Then I'll deal with it. But I can't keep living in the dark. They planned a trip for Saturday, telling their parents they were visiting a college art exhibit. Margaret was suspicious, but Paul's distracted nod got them out the door. The bus to Boston smelled of stale coffee and damp coats, but Ezra barely noticed, his mind on Lena. Liam sat beside him, sketching in his book, the lines of his pencil grounding Ezra's nerves. Boston was a whirlwind of noise and color, so different from Willow Creek's quiet streets. The gallery was tucked in a narrow alley, its windows glowing with warm light. Inside, Lena's paintings lined the walls, bold swirls of color, each one pulsing with emotion. Ezra felt a pang, recognizing something of his mother in the brushstrokes. Lena was there, a woman in her 40s with short, silver-streaked hair and warm brown eyes. She greeted them with a curious smile. But when Ezra introduced himself as Clara's son, her face softened, tears glinting at the edges. You look like her, Lena said, her voice thick. Same eyes. Ezra's throat tightened. I found your photo. In her things. She wrote about the summer of '98. Lena's smile faded, replaced by a mix of sorrow and pride. That was a lifetime ago. Clara and I, we were more than friends. We loved each other, fiercely, but the world wasn't ready for us. Neither was Willow Creek. Ezra's heart stopped. His mother is gentle. Pie-baking mother had loved a woman. The revelation was a seismic shift, rewriting everything he thought he knew. "Why did you leave?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Lena's gaze dropped to her hands. The backlash after the rally was brutal. Clara wanted to stay, to fight. But I couldn't. I was scared. I broke her heart when I left. And I've regretted it every day. Liam's hand found Ezra's. A quiet anchor. Ezra squeezed back, his mind reeling. "She wrote me letters," he said. "She said to ask my dad about 98. Do you know why?" Lena's eyes darkened. "Your father, he knew about us. He loved Clara, too, in his own way. But he wasn't ready to face what it meant. I think she wanted you to know her truth. Ezra. All of it." The weight of it settled over him. Heavy but illuminating. Clara hadn't just been his mother, she'd been a woman who loved boldly, who fought for it, who hid her heart to protect him. As they left the gallery, the city lights blurring around them, Ezra felt Liam's hand still in his. "You okay?" Liam asked, his voice soft. Ezra nodded, tears stinging his eyes. I think I'm starting to understand her. And me." Back in Willow Creek, the air felt heavier, as if the town itself carried the weight of Clara's secrets. Ezra clutched the journal, Lena's words echoing in his mind. His mother had loved a woman, had fought for love in a place that tried to smother it. And now, Ezra felt the same fire in his chest, the need to be seen, to be himself, no matter what Margaret or the town thought. Liam walked him home, their steps slow, the silence between them comfortable but charged. At the edge of Ezra's yard, Liam stopped, his green eyes catching the moonlight. "Whatever happens next, I'm with you," he said. Ezra's heart stuttered. He wanted to say anything to bridge the gap between them, to name the feeling that sparked every time Liam's hand brushed his. But fear held him back, the shadow of Margaret's slap still fresh. Instead, he nodded, his voice soft. "Thanks, Liam." Inside, the house was quiet. Margaret and Paul at a church meeting. Ezra crept to the attic, the wooden chest still open from the night before. He sifted through more letters, each one a glimpse into Clara's heart. One, dated just before her death, caught his eye. "Ezra, my love, I've made mistakes, but loving Lena wasn't one of them. I hid it to protect you, but I hope one day you'll live your truth without fear. Be brave, my boy, for both of us." Tears blurred Ezra's vision. Clara had known maybe not the details, but the shape of his heart. She'd seen the boy who loved Liam, who hid it behind sarcasm and silence. Her words were a gift, a permission he hadn't known he needed. The next day, Ezra and Liam went to the community center, where the art class was setting up for an exhibit. Liam's sketches would be displayed, including the portrait of Clara. Ezra helped hang the drawings, his mind still on the letters. Margaret arrived unexpectedly, her presence like a storm cloud. She scanned the room, her eyes landing on Liam's sketch of Clara with the rainbow flag. Her face tightened, and she marched over to Ezra. "What is this?" she demanded, gesturing at the drawing. "It's my mom," Ezra said, his voice steady, the way she was. Margaret's eyes narrowed. "You're digging up things that don't concern you. Stop this nonsense, or you'll regret it." Ezra's hands balled into fists, Clara's words echoing in his mind. "Be brave." "It concerns me," he said, his voice rising. "She was my mom, and she loved someone you tried to erase. I won't let you do that to hear her to me." The room went quiet, the other students watching. Margaret's face flushed, but before she could speak, Liam stepped forward. "He's right, Margaret. Clara was a hero, and Ezra's honoring her." Margaret's gaze flicked to Liam, then back to Ezra. "You're making a mistake," she said, her voice low and dangerous. She turned and left, her heels clicking like a countdown. Ezra's heart pounded, but he felt lighter, as if a weight had lifted. Liam grinned, his eyes bright. "That was badass," he said. Ezra laughed, a shaky sound. I'm probably grounded for life. Worth it, Liam said, his hand brushing Ezra's. This time, Ezra didn't pull away. That night, Ezra confronted Paul again. The journal opened to Clara's final letter. Dad, I met Lena. I know about her and Mom. Why didn't you tell me? Paul's face crumpled, his hands shaking. I wanted to protect you. Your mom. She asked me to wait until you were ready. I didn't know how to start. Start now? Ezra said, his voice firm but not unkind. Paul sighed, his eyes distant. Clara and Lena were in love, but the town people like Margaret's family made it impossible. When Lena left, Clara was heartbroken, but she chose me. We built a life. Had you? She never stopped loving Lena, though. Not really. Ezra's chest ached, but it wasn't just grief, it was pride, too. His mother had loved fiercely, despite the cost. Why didn't you stand up to Margaret? He asked. Paul's shoulders sagged. I was weak. I thought I could keep the peace. I'm sorry, Ezra. The apology was a start, but it wasn't enough. Ezra needed more than words. She needed his father to see him, to fight for him. I'm like her, Dad, he said, his voice trembling. I think I love Liam. Paul's eyes widened, but he didn't look away. For the first time, Ezra saw something like understanding in his father's gaze. Okay, Paul said softly. Okay. It wasn't everything, but it was a crack in the wall between them. Ezra felt Clara's presence in that moment, her courage guiding him forward. The art exhibit was the talk of Willow Creek, a rare moment of color in the town's gray routine. Ezra stood by Liam's sketches, his mother's portrait drawing whispers from the crowd. Clara's face, framed by the faint rainbow flag, seemed to watch over him, her eyes kind but fierce. Ezra felt her strength in his bones, a fire that Margaret couldn't extinguish. Liam was nervous, his hands fidgeting as people admired his work. They're staring, he muttered, glancing at Ezra. Let them, Ezra said, his voice steady. They're seeing her. And us. Liam's smile was small but real, and Ezra felt that electric pull again, the unspoken thing between them. He wanted to reach for Liam's hand, to claim it in front of everyone. But Margaret's shadow loomed large. She'd been quiet since the confrontation, but Ezra knew she was biding her time. The exhibit ended with applause, and Liam's teacher pulled him aside to praise his work. Ezra slipped outside, needing air. The night was cool, the stars sharp above the town. He opened the journal, rereading Clara's words, "Be brave, my boy." Footsteps crunched behind him. He turned, expecting Liam, but it was Paul. His father looked older in the moonlight, his face lined with regret. I've been a coward, Paul said, his voice raw. I let Margaret control things because it was easier. But you're stronger than I ever was. Ezra's throat tightened. I just want to be me, Dad, like Mom was. Paul nodded, his eyes glistening. I know, and I'm going to try harder. For you. Before Ezra could respond, Margaret's voice cut through the night. Paul, what are you doing out here? She stood at the edge of the lot, her arms crossed, her gaze icy. Paul straightened, a spark of defiance in his eyes. Talking to my son, he said, his voice firm. And we're not done. Margaret's face tightened, but she didn't argue. She turned and walked away, her silence more ominous than her words. Ezra felt a flicker of hope. Maybe his father was waking up. Liam joined them, his sketchbook tucked under his arm. Everything okay? He asked, his eyes flicking between Ezra and Paul. Yeah, Ezra said, surprising himself with the truth of it. Getting there. The next day, Ezra and Liam returned to the attic, searching for more clues. They found another letter, tucked inside an envelope with a single word, Lena. It was longer, written in a hurried scrawl, as if Clara had been afraid of being caught. Ezra, if you find this, you've met Lena. She was my heart, my rebellion. We planned to leave Willow Creek together, but I stayed for your father. For you. I don't regret it. but I regret the silence. Tell Lena I forgive her. And tell yourself you're enough. Just as you are. Ezra's hands shook as he read it aloud. Liam's eyes were soft. His voice quiet. She wanted you to know you're enough. Ezra nodded. Tears spilling over. I think I'm ready to be. That night, they sat on Ezra's porch, the journal between them. Liam's hand found Ezra's. And this time, Ezra didn't pull away. Their fingers intertwined. A quiet promise in the dark. I like you, Ezra said, the words spilling out before he could stop them. A lot. Liam's smile was radiant, his eyes bright with something like relief. I like you, too. A lot. They laughed, the sound shaky but real. For the first time, Ezra felt free, as if Clara's love had carved a space for him to exist. But Margaret's shadow still lingered, and Ezra knew the fight wasn't over. The next morning, Margaret confronted him in the kitchen, her face a mask of fury. I found your mother's letters, she said, holding up the envelope with Lena's name. This ends now. Ezra, you will not disgrace this family with her sins. Ezra's heart pounded, but he stood tall, Clara's words in his mind. Her sins. She loved someone. That's not a sin. And neither is me loving Liam. Margaret's face went white, her hand trembling. For a moment, Ezra thought she might slap him again. But Paul stepped forward, his voice steady. That's enough. Margaret. He's my son. And Clara's. We're done hiding. The room was silent, the air crackling with tension. Margaret's eyes darted between them. But for the first time, she looked uncertain. Ezra felt a surge of strength, his mother's courage flowing through him. The truth was out, and he wasn't backing down. The days after the confrontation were a tightrope walk. Margaret's presence in the house was a storm waiting to break, her silence louder than her words. Paul, though, was different, tentative, but present, asking Ezra about school, about Liam, about the journal. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start, a bridge Ezra hadn't known he needed. Ezra and Liam spent every spare moment together, their connection deepening with each shared secret. They sat by the oak tree, the journal open, Clara's letters a roadmap to courage. Ezra felt her with him, her love a shield against the town's whispers and Margaret's glares. One evening, Ezra found Paul in the living room, holding a photo of Clara from the '98 rally. She was fearless, Paul said, his voice thick. I should have been, too. Ezra sat beside him, the journal in his lap. You can be now, he said. For her. For me. Paul nodded, tears in his eyes. I'm trying. Ezra. I promise. The turning point came at the town's winter festival. A month after the fair, Ezra and Liam walked hand in hand, their fingers intertwined, a quiet act of defiance. The crowd's stares were sharp, but Ezra held his head high, Clara's pin tucked into his jacket. Margaret was there, her face a mask of disapproval. But Paul stood beside Ezra, his presence a silent support. When the festival's talent show began, Liam took the stage, unveiling a new sketch, Clara and Lena, arm in arm, their faces radiant against a backdrop of rainbow flags. The crowd murmured, some with awe, others with discomfort, but Ezra felt only pride. After the show, Margaret approached, her voice low. This has to stop. Ezra, you're tearing this family apart. Ezra met her gaze, his voice calm but firm. I'm not tearing anything apart. I'm building something. For me. For Mom. Paul stepped forward, his hand on Ezra's shoulder. He's right. Margaret. This is our family, Clara's family. If you can't accept that, maybe you don't belong here. The words hung heavy, a line drawn in the sand. Margaret's face crumpled, and for the first time, Ezra saw something like vulnerability in her eyes. She turned and walked away, her silhouette fading into the crowd. Later, Ezra and Liam sat by the oak tree, the journal open to Clara's final letter. Ezra read it aloud, his voice steady. Be brave, my boy. For both of us. I think I am. Ezra said, his eyes on Liam. Because of her. And you. Liam smiled, leaning in until their foreheads touched. You're enough. Ezra. You always were. They kissed, soft and tentative, under the stars. It wasn't perfect, but it was there's a moment Clara would have cheered for. A truth she'd fought for. Months later, Ezra learned Margaret had moved out, unable to reconcile with Paul's newfound resolve. The house felt lighter, a space where Ezra could breathe. He and Liam grew closer, their love a quiet rebellion against the town's lingering judgment. Paul began to heal, too, sharing stories of Clara that Ezra had never heard, each one a gift. The journal stayed with Ezra, its pages worn but cherished. Clara's letters had revealed a truth that silenced the noisy truth about love, courage, and living authentically. Ezra carried it with him, a beacon for the boy he was and the man he'd become. And under the oak tree, with Liam by his side, Ezra knew he was exactly where he was meant to be.